We usually think a smart dog is one that obeys quickly. Sit, stay, come. But some dogs were created for something much harder, making decisions when no human could help them. Welcome back to Wild Unknown, where the animals we think we know are rarely what they seem. Underground, across open wilderness, beside dangerous animals. For these dogs, waiting for an order could mean failing the job entirely. So humans developed something unusual. Dogs intelligent enough to sometimes ignore us. Today we're counting down 7 breeds built to think for themselves. And by number 1, you may never look at a stubborn dog the same way again. Today, the Dachshund may look perfectly designed for blankets, couches, and stealing the warmest spot in the house. But that strange body wasn't created to be cute. It was built to go underground. The breed's name literally points to its original purpose, hunting badgers. And imagine what that job demanded. Once a Dachshund entered a narrow burrow, the hunter couldn't follow. There was no human standing beside the dog, no clear view of what was ahead, no time to wait for instructions. Inside that darkness, the dog had to keep moving, judge the situation, and rely on its own instincts. That required something very different from simple obedience. It required independence. And suddenly, one of the Dachshund's most famous modern traits begins to make a little more sense. What owners sometimes call stubbornness may be connected to generations of dogs that were expected to keep working even when humans weren't there to guide every decision. A Dachshund wasn't useful because it constantly looked back and asked, "What should I do now?" It was useful because it could disappear into a place humans couldn't go and continue the job anyway. That's an extraordinary amount of confidence packed into a very small body. And perhaps that's why living with one today can occasionally feel like negotiating with a dog that already has its own plan. But at least the Dachshund's decisions were made underground. The next breed could stand right in front of you, understand exactly what you're asking, and still seem to wonder, why should I? Tell a Shiba Inu what you want, and sometimes you can almost see the calculation happening. It heard you. It understood you. Now it's deciding whether your idea is better than its idea. And that difference matters. The Shiba Inu developed in Japan as a hunting dog, working through rugged terrain where independence, awareness, and quick judgment were valuable. This wasn't a dog designed to spend every second waiting for detailed instructions. It needed confidence, instinct, and the ability to react to a changing situation. Those qualities didn't disappear just because the hunting grounds were replaced by modern homes. Today, Shibas are famous for their independent personalities. They can learn quickly, but learning a command and feeling obligated to obey it are two very different things. And that's where people sometimes confuse intelligence with obedience. A dog that immediately follows every instruction may look smarter. But what about the dog that understands the instruction, evaluates the situation, and makes its own choice? For generations, independence could be useful. In a modern living room, it can feel like your dog has hired itself as management. But that's part of what makes the Shiba so fascinating. Behind that fox-like face is a dog with a surprisingly strong sense of autonomy. It doesn't always seem to ask, "What does my human want?" Sometimes the question feels more like, "What do I think we should do?" And if the Shiba represents independence through personality, the next dog takes us somewhere colder, older, and far more dangerous. Because number 5 was expected to work around animals powerful enough to turn a bad decision into a disaster. Imagine following an animal far larger than you through dense Scandinavian forest with your human somewhere behind. That was the kind of world the Norwegian Elkhound was built for. For centuries, these powerful northern dogs were used in hunting large game, including moose. And this wasn't a job where a dog could simply wait beside the hunter for the next command. The Elkhound had to search, follow scent, stay aware of where the animal was moving, and once it found its quarry, it had to use judgment rather than reckless force. That distinction matters, because when you're dealing with an animal many times your size, Bravery without judgment can get you killed. The dog needed enough confidence to work away from the hunter, yet enough awareness to keep the situation under control until the human could arrive. So independence wasn't a personality flaw. It was part of the job. And you can still see echoes of that mindset in the breed today. Norwegian Elkhounds are intelligent dogs, but intelligence doesn't always look like perfect obedience. Sometimes it looks like awareness, persistence, and a dog that seems perfectly comfortable forming its own opinion about what should happen next. That's the pattern we're beginning to see. The Dachshund had to think underground. The Shiba had to rely on instinct. The Elkhound had to make decisions at a distance. But number 4 faced a completely different problem. It wasn't trying to outthink an animal in the forest. It had to control animals that could outweigh it many times over and convince them to move. Imagine trying to move an animal 10 times your size, an animal that has absolutely no interest in going where you want it to go. Now imagine doing it across enormous stretches of unforgiving Australian land. That was the world the Australian cattle dog was built for. These dogs weren't meant to be passive followers. They had to read movement, notice hesitation, react when cattle suddenly change direction, and sometimes make a decision before the human handler had time to give one. That required more than intelligence. It required initiative. The dog had to understand the goal, without needing every step explained. And that distinction is important. Because real working intelligence isn't always about following instructions perfectly. Sometimes it's about recognizing a problem and solving it yourself. That's one reason Australian cattle dogs can feel almost frighteningly observant. Give one nothing to do, and that powerful brain doesn't simply switch off. It may find a job of its own, and there's no guarantee you'll approve of the assignment. That's the strange trade humans made when they developed dogs like this. We wanted animals capable of thinking independently when the situation demanded it. Then we brought them into our homes and wondered why they sometimes had their own ideas. But controlling cattle still meant working toward a human goal. Number 3 takes independence somewhere much wilder. Because this dog was developed to pursue dangerous game across vast African landscapes where hesitation could lose the quarry, and one reckless decision could put everything at risk. Few dogs have a reputation as dramatic as the Rhodesian Ridgeback. Mention its history, and one word usually appears: lions. But the most interesting part of that story isn't that these dogs simply charged into enormous predators. In fact, that would have been a terrible strategy. The real challenge was far more complicated. Ridgebacks were developed in southern Africa for demanding hunting conditions, where dogs could work at a distance from humans. They needed endurance, awareness, confidence, and perhaps most importantly, judgment. A dog confronting dangerous game couldn't depend on a human whispering instructions into its ear. The situation could change in seconds, move too close, and the dog could put itself in serious danger, lose contact, and the hunt could disappear into the landscape. So the valuable dog wasn't necessarily the most aggressive one. It was the one capable of reading what was happening and reacting without waiting for constant direction. That's a very different kind of intelligence. Not tricks, not perfect obedience, decision-making under pressure, and suddenly, the Ridgeback's famous independence becomes easier to understand. Humans needed a dog confident enough to operate beyond immediate control, then expected that confidence to disappear when the working day ended. It didn't. Even today, the Rhodesian Ridgeback is often described as intelligent and independent, but number 2 takes this idea somewhere even more extreme. Because this next dog wasn't sent out to find danger. For generations, danger was expected to come looking for it. High in the Himalayas, darkness changed everything. People slept. Livestock settled down. But somewhere beyond the edge of camp, something could be watching. And the Tibetan Mastiff couldn't simply wake its owner every time the night felt wrong. For generations, these massive guardian dogs were valued for protecting homes, camps, and livestock in harsh environments. That meant spending long periods without someone directing every move. A strange sound, an unfamiliar presence, something approaching in the darkness. The dog had to decide, is this normal or is this a threat? And sometimes that judgment had to happen before a human even knew there was a problem. This is where the Tibetan Mastiff becomes fascinating. Its independence wasn't designed for hunting underground or controlling cattle. It came from responsibility. A guardian that needs permission before reacting isn't much use when the danger arrives first. So these dogs developed a reputation for being highly independent and naturally protective. And in a modern home, that ancient mindset can create an unusual relationship. You may own the house, but your Tibetan Mastiff may believe security decisions are a shared responsibility. That's why this breed isn't simply a giant dog waiting for commands. Behind all that fur is an animal whose ancestors were expected to watch, evaluate, and decide. But there's still one breed left, and number one doesn't look like a giant guardian. It isn't massive. It isn't intimidating. In fact, compared with the Tibetan Mastiff, it looks almost delicate. Yet hidden inside that small, elegant body is one of the oldest kinds of canine intelligence, the intelligence to survive without waiting for us. The Basenji doesn't look like the most independent dog on this list. It's smaller than the Ridgeback, far smaller than the Tibetan Mastiff, elegant, quiet, almost delicate. But don't mistake size for dependence, because the Basenji comes from a world where a dog couldn't expect humans to solve every problem for it. Developed as a hunting dog in Central Africa, the Basenji worked with people, but not like a machine waiting for commands. It needed awareness, speed, instinct, and enough independence to make decisions while working away from direct human control. And that ancient mindset helps explain something fascinating about the breed today. Basenjis are intelligent, but intelligence and obedience are not the same thing. A Basenji may understand what you're asking, then decide whether doing it makes sense. To some owners, that can look stubborn. To others, almost cat-like. But look at the history behind the behavior, and suddenly it becomes harder to call it a flaw. For generations, dogs like this were valuable precisely because humans couldn't control every second of the job. They needed a partner with a brain of its own, and that's why the Basenji takes our #1 spot. Not because it's the smartest dog in some simple ranking, but because it represents the entire idea behind this list. Sometimes intelligence isn't demonstrated by the dog that obeys fastest. Sometimes it's demonstrated by the dog that knows how to function when nobody is there to tell it what comes next. And perhaps that's the biggest misunderstanding we have about independent dogs. We call them difficult. We call them stubborn. We wonder why they don't simply do what they're told. But maybe we're looking at the wrong question, because these dogs weren't created to ask, "What does my human want me to do?" They were created to ask, "What needs to be done?" So the next time a dog ignores a command, don't assume it didn't understand. For some breeds, independence was never a mistake. It was the reason humans needed them. Underground, across open country, around powerful animals, or alone in the darkness. These dogs were trusted to make decisions when people couldn't make them first. Today we may call that behavior stubborn. But history tells a different story. Sometimes the dog that questions you isn't less intelligent. It may simply be thinking for itself. So tell us in the comments, which of these 7 breeds surprised you the most? And subscribe to Wild Unknown for more stories behind the animals we think we already know. Because sometimes, the smartest decision a dog can make is its own.